Welcome to Unitarian Universalist Church, Pacific, that is, to be specific. We have a number of announcements today, of course. We have some upcoming regional workshops that are headed our way, which are great. We're starting to talk about what reopening will look like, but I wouldn't get too excited about that. That doesn't look like it still looks like it's a ways off, but we'll probably bring people out onto the patio in some format soon. But we're still not inviting people to come to sort of watch church. They can sit outside, there's a few, but we're really kind of discouraging people coming inside for that. We're not quite prepared to that. We want to open and have everybody certainly be safe. There's two sort of, if you're new to Unitarian Universalism or you just like to hear about your tradition, Thursday night I'm going to do a broadcast for the South Coast Interfaith Council, which reaches sort of Long Beach and around. It's a multicultural group I'm on the board of. That's Thursday night, 7. Gabby's going to try to put up their link to that workshop on our website. But on Saturday morning, I'm going to do a repeat of that for us, which I'm considering kind of a new member class. So we're going to reach out to some of the newer members and have them tune in on that as a way to engage our folks and prepare them for membership. Side note, Marianne and I are working on a Death and Dying series. Kelly too is jumping in on that, and that's going to start in April and May. I haven't had any takers on the sort of share your skills offering, but I'm open to that. So if anybody has something they want to come on, on a Saturday morning and sort of talk about kind of in the way that I do that on the adult ed workshops, there's a lot of talent in this church. We had the Space Cadets group talking about their experiences with space, which I think was pretty interesting. So if anybody has something they want to share that's, even vaguely churchy relevant, then please do. We are going to have our anniversary dinner. We've got the pledge drive just around the corner starting. But I want you to mark your calendars for Saturday night, March 20th. We're going to have delivered food to people in their homes. So we're going to have an anniversary dinner together but apart. And we're going to have some form of entertainment that night on Zoom. So we're going to do something, think of it in the same way that if you participated in the Black and White concert, the chance to chat and the chance to have entertainment. We'll, in this case, also have food. So that's what's headed our way. I had a colleague named Marta Valentin. She was a Latinx colleague of mine, and we served on a social justice committee back in Boston. She has become sort of a high-profile person in congregational life. Her chalice words are going to be our words today. She says this, it's a fierce hope and a vision. If the Pale Center of our denomination responds to the call for something more, they will turn to face the edges where we are, a rainbow of faces and cultures, engaging in a Unitarian Universalism that breathes love into its very core. From our well-worn hearts, she speaks, they will no longer find us waiting, but creating a Unitarian Universalism for everyone. I light our chalice with those challenges and thoughts. There are moments in the life of any culture or of any people where injustices rise to the surface for a particular form of viewing. Usually they're truths that have already existed for a long time. I think we all know that this year has uncovered a few. One being that a healthcare system where we rely privately on people to have healthcare, and in any efforts to be systematic in responding to any kind of broad, in this case, a global health crisis, can be expensive beyond the efficiency that not preparing for it causes. The other issue that rose itself up this year, of course, is the issue of racism and how systematic that has been in our culture and in our hearts, but even more importantly, passively and quietly in our institutions. Collectively, UUs, long before George Floyd murder set off the firestorm of activism and awareness, we were pushing for a level of self-reflection, trying to center as much as possible historically silenced voices. There was controversies about leadership at the UUA, leading to the resignation of a president. And yet, at the same time, we have this sort of painful awareness that African Americans make up a varying degree between 1% and 3% of registered UUs. A group of about 20 to a dozen has been looking for about 9 months at the history of American racism. I've talked about it a lot. The emotional unconscious racism that creates resistance to change. These conversations have led us to this particular book called Mistakes and Miracles, of which it is not too late to jump in on. We're at about chapter 6 now. These are those 1 o'clock deeper dive calls. And Mistakes and Miracles are a book that basically Nancy Palmer Jones and Karen Lynn, an ordained white minister in Cambridge, and a woman, an Asian American woman, set out to tell stories of 5 congregations that have intentionally put themselves on the path to what we presently call a greater beloved community, a more multicultural community. And today we tell that story in context to ourselves and in context to the need for an obviously broader community. Before that, we're going to sing a hymn. Severin, Bill, take it away.
All right. Amazing Grace is number 205, and you'll see it on the screen. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved us so like me. I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already passed. 'Tis grace that brought me safe thus far, and grace that leads me home.
It's now time for our children's moment. I invite all those at home who are young or young at heart to crowd the screen, push your parents aside. We're going to watch a video. It's a fairly lengthy one. We're going to see about a little bit under 7 minutes of a story. It's really well done. It's called Something Happened in Our Town, but I as a challenge to our kids out there, and as a small way of sort of representing and feeling the way that racism affects people that aren't white, I invite you kids to try something that might be kind of fun, but might be kind of hard. I want you to see if you can stand up. I want you to hold your left arm out straight, as stiff as you can. I want you to touch your nose with your right hand and see if you can stand on one foot. You can pick whatever foot you want. You can even shift between your feet while we watch this video called Something Happened in Our Town. And I want you to think about what it's like to not have advantage, but a little bit of disadvantage as you walk through life while Gabby shows us this video.
In Our Town, a child's story about racial injustice by Marianne Solano, Marietta Collins, and Ann Hazard. Illustrated by Jennifer Zivian. This story is read with permission by Imagination Press. Something bad happened in our town. The news was on the TV, the radio, and the internet. The grown-ups didn't think the kids knew about it, but the kids in Miss Garcia's class heard some older kids talking about it, and they had questions. After school, Emma asked her mother, "Why did the police shoot that man?" "It was a mistake," said her mother. "I feel sorry for the man and his family." "Yes, the police thought he had a gun," said her father. "It wasn't a mistake," said her sister Liz. "The cops shot him because he was black." Emma was confused. "He is brown, not black," she said. "Some black people have dark brown skin and some have light brown skin," Emma's father explained. "Black usually means African American. Most of their ancestors were brought here from Africa as slaves." "I know what a slave is," said Emma. "That's when you have to do whatever the other person says." "Yes, slaves had to do whatever white people told them to do. Even after slavery ended, white people didn't let black people live where they wanted, go to school with white people, or vote." "Who are white people?" "White people came from places in Europe or Russia or other countries. We are white people, even though our skin is light tan." "Did our family do those bad things a long time ago?" Emma asked. "Yes," answered her mother. "Back then, many white people thought that they were better than black people, even though it wasn't true." Liz added, "Some white people still think most black men and boys are dangerous, even though they're not." "Was the man that got shot dangerous?" asked Emma. "No," her mother said. "Shooting him was a mistake. It was a mistake that is part of a pattern." "Like a pattern on my blanket?" Emma asked. "Yes, but this pattern is being nice to white people and mean to black people. It's an unfair pattern. Suppose you had a birthday party and invited everyone in your class except the black kids," her mother said. "How would the black kids feel?" "They would be sad," Emma said, "or mad. And you would be missing out because you never know who is going to be your best friend," said Liz. "And you can help others to be fair," said her mother. "Like telling Anna to stop teasing Ling about her name?" asked Emma. Her mother gave her a hug. "Yes, just like that." In another house, Josh asked his mother, "Can police go to jail?" "Yes," said his mother. "Why do you ask?" That white policeman who shot the black man, said Josh. Will he go to jail? What he did was wrong, said his mother. But he won't go to jail, said his father. Why not? Asked Josh. Cops stick up for each other, said Josh's brother Malcolm. And they don't like black men. Josh was confused. Why not? Some police are black. You're right, said his mother. Uncle James is a police officer, and so is my friend Kenya. There are many cops, black and white, who make good choices, said his father. But you can't count on them to always do what's right. Malcolm added, I can get stopped by the police just because I'm black, even if I don't do anything wrong. That's not fair, Josh said. What if it was a white man in the car? Would the police have shot him? They probably wouldn't even have stopped the car, said his father. Sometimes white people are treated better than black people, said his mother. But it's not right. Everybody should be treated fairly. Josh's mother gave him a hug. We're proud of who we are. Harriet Tubman, Martin Luther King Jr., and Nelson Mandela were strong and brave black leaders. They showed us that we can stand up for our rights and set good examples for others. They were treated unfairly, but helped others learn to be more fair. Some people haven't learned, said his father angrily. Why are you mad? Asked Josh. I'm mad that we're still treated poorly sometimes, but I can use my anger to make things better, said his father. Black people have a lot of power if we work together to make changes. I have power, Josh said, and I'm smart. His father smiled. You're right, his mother added, and you can change people's hearts by sticking up for someone who is not treated fairly. Like Malcolm sticks up for me when the kids tease me about my glasses, Josh asked. He tells them to step off, just like that, his parents said. The next day, a new kid joined Emma in Josh's class. His name was Omad, and he was from a country far away. Omad didn't know where to sit or what to do because it was his first day in school. He talked a little bit, but it was hard to understand him. He said he was learning English. After lunch, the class went outside to play soccer. Daniel and Sophia picked kids to be on their teams. All of the kids were picked to be on a team except Omad. Daniel said Omad probably didn't know how to play because he was new. Sophia said Omad might not be good at soccer. Josh remembered what his mother said about sticking up for people who were treated unfairly. Emma remembered what her mother said about unfair patterns and birthday parties. All of a sudden, Omad wasn't alone. Emma and Josh were leading him to their team. We have enough kids on our team, Daniel said. We don't need him. But Josh was ready. Step off, he said. He's playing. Yeah, said Emma. We don't want to miss out. And just like that, Emma and Josh gained a new friend and started a better pattern in their school.
You kids survive the 1 foot? Did anybody play along with that? It's a powerful story. It's now time for joys and concerns. I invite Gary to come forward and light our joy and concern candle. Got some good news. Lisa Seitz is recovering pretty well. You know, this is a shame. We normally come forward and light our own candles and tell our own stories, right? A great act of democracy here. Chelsea, too, is getting better from eye issues, and her elbow and wrist is ever slowly getting better. I think about Marion Monet, who I just spoke to, and she's been a really good daughter, spending a lot of time with her mom, who's home and has some challenges, but is stable. And we have the sad news of Val Richards lost one of her daughters this week. So I don't want to give out an address publicly like this, but if you call the office or you call me, we'll give you a chance to write her a card. I'll give you her address to write a card. I also want to lift up Marianne Stein and George, whose son is struggling with some health issues. I don't need contacts, but a few good vibes their way. They're headed to the Midwest for a little bit. Maybe a few warm thoughts towards them and their son. Obviously, thoughts for Texas, which is, remarkably cold right now, as everyone following the news would know. Not everybody, hardly anyone, has the consistent weather we do. So a candle of joy and concern for the reason it's so expensive to be here. I want to invite up, in place of a prayer, I'm going to invite up a little portions of our choir to do a little round of come, whoever you are, socially distanced, and give us a little bit more musical support on this Sunday. Thanks.
Come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come. Come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come. Come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come.
Ours is no caravan of despair.
Come, yet again come.
Our reading today comes from Amanda Gorman, the nation's first ever poet laureate, youth poet laureate, that is, who read the following poem during the inauguration of President Joe Biden on January 20th. As you may think that it's odd to put the words of a young Black woman in the mouth of middle-aged white people, but we are sincere about attempting to broaden out and share culture in an effort to weave America together. So please take it in that light. the hill we climb.
When the day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade, the loss we carry?
A sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace.
And the norms and notions of what just isn't always justice. And yet the dawn is ours before we knew it.
Somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished.
We, the successors of a country and a time where a skinny black girl, descended from slaves and raised by a single mother, can dream of becoming president only to find herself reciting for one.
And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine. But that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge a union with purpose.
To compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gaze not to what stands between us, but what stands before us.
We close the divide because we know to put our future first. We must put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another.
We seek harm to none and harmony for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true, that even as we grieved, we grew, that even as we hurt, we hoped, that even as we tired, we tried.
That we'll forever be tied together, victorious, not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division. Scripture tells us to envision
that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. If we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade.
But in all the bridges we've made, that is the promise to glade, the hill we climb, if only we dare.
It's because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it.
Would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated.
In this truth, in this faith, we trust. For while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us.
This is the era of just redemption we feared at its inception. We did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such a terrifying hour.
But within it, we found the power to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves. So while once we asked, how could we possibly prevail over catastrophe?
Now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be.
A country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation.
Because we know our inaction and our inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Our blunders will become their burdens. But one thing is certain.
If we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright.
So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left with. Every breath from my bronze-pounded chest, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one.
We will rise from the gold-limbed hills of the West. We will rise from the windswept Northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states.
We will rise from the sun-baked south. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover in every known nook of our nation and every corner called our country.
Our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge, battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new day blooms as we free it.
For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it. If only we're brave enough to be it.
Powerful words. So many of us, 15 of us or so, have been reading this book, Mistakes and Miracles. I think it's probably the most useful book I've read on race, and I've read a few. When we start talking race and Unitarian Universalism, I walk through this series of emotions that sort of flows in some haphazard way, from challenging to inspired, back to scary, back to challenging, daunting, and then compelling, around to challenging again, each time in some different order. It's now one of the many tools we have. I was reared, like most of us probably, to think racism is immoral, and also to ignore it. I don't like being told I'm a racist, although over the last few years, the last year in particular, I've come to realize the ways in which I am. I think we've all come to realize that by nearly all metrics, and particularly from the voices of African Americans themselves, we've failed to integrate people of color into the fabric of our culture, much of what Amanda speaks of in her poem. Doing that at the societal level, as we all know, if you're paying attention at all, is incredibly challenging. Doing that in Unitarian Universalism is at least as challenging. This is hard, deep, rich stuff. The authors of this book talk about it all the time. I wished it were easier. They talk about how they wished it were easier. Unitarian Universalism has historically been a pretty white thing, but with the big promise of something else. Something most commonly described now as beloved community, a line stolen from King's speech, who he stole from someone else. We do have a beloved community here at Pacific Unitarian Church. If anyone is not familiar with it, I would encourage you to, tune in and feel that. But that's the small b and small c beloved community. If we're honest, we're not nearly representative enough of the broader world. It would probably be the first thing we would notice. And for all the morality and justice we talk about, there is a limitation to what we can do because of who we are. It's funny that race has this odd impact in our society, because race doesn't really exist. Race is a social construct. It's not a genus or a species. It's not a line in the sand that exists anywhere in biology. Race is a concept that we came up with to talk about the differences that we had and saw and felt before we had a word for it. Race matters a lot, and race doesn't exist. I'd like you to hold those two things there. And I'd like to put aside any shoulds of where you think our church should go, or any church should go, or how hard and how strong it should fight for that. So Kin and Palmer up of this vision that the way forward is worth fighting for. It's going to be uncomfortable. The way forward being towards a more multicultural and diverse church, and not only just in terms of token numbers of people here or there, in terms of the broadening of the culture that Unitarian Universalists have. There's this balance. It's it's a balance of sort of who we are, meeting the way the world is, and bridging that gap so we can be the future that we brag we want to be. The book is really nothing more than elaborate case studies of 5 imperfect churches that are a little along further, in many cases quite a ways along the further, as mentors for us. Imperfect. And I'm not sure as the pastor of this church or any church I would be that comfortable having the journey towards their version of multicultural exposed as it was. There wasn't a lot of specific studies. Our movement is small enough. There's somewhere between 1,000 and 1,100 churches across the country. There's something like 160,000 adult UUs, registered active members of those churches at any one time. So we were looking to Christian models beforehand, and a lot of those lessons are transferable. Churches are churches, after all, functioning with some of the same habits and inclinations and principles and all of that. But they tended to be a little bit tighter. Perhaps the major metaphor that the authors offer on the journey towards this beloved community, this multicultural space, is one of an imperfect winding path. One that you never sort of get over that last hill is the way I think of it, but where the horizon is always sort of visible. I like that. Let's take a minute. Tara will be proud of me. She talks about vision a lot, and I want you to hold the vision of what this place could be. What's your perfect PUC church? What's the church that you want to walk into on a Sunday when we can back walk into our churches again? I suspect it's a little bit or a lot like mine. In my world, the first thing that it is it's a little bit bigger. It's just got a little bit more buzz. It's just a little bit harder to find a seat. The second thing it is for me is that it's more multi-generational, right? More for me than first, it's people of color that are different, although that's fast behind it. I'd like to see more diversity of the age in our congregation. The funny thing about this vision is that the getting there is often really very much the same kind of things. So I'd like to see this place be busy and buzzy. And the image that I had, I sort of started this dream board that I didn't finish before today, and it had a hive. We have beehives in 2 spots here. And I'd love it to be a bit of I love the relative privacy I have up here sometimes during the week, but I would tell you that I would like it to be a little bit more chaotic. Leanne is shaking her head at me now because she knows that I like a little more chaos than she does. And it would certainly be more multiracial. That's probably the third thing. It's not because I don't like white people. I'm more comfortable around white people than any other people. You're probably more comfortable around whatever people you identify with. But being more racially diverse would be, frankly, it would warm my heart, and I think the heart of most of us. And it would do so for a number of reasons. It would mean that we have more emotional range. We need a little bit more emotional range. I need a little bit more emotional range. So on this dream board, you sort of set your path, right? This is like a positive thinking tool people use. A little more imperfection is accepted. A little more dynamism. A little bit more vision. But the one thing that they suggest in this book that's required above all things is that there's an intentionality. You have to sort of grab wanting it. You have to have a critical mass of people in the congregation that want to become anything that a congregation becomes, unless it just falls into that place. In this book, just if you got the time, it's a great book. You won't even get through a chapter. It'll take you forever, at least for me. Direction and passion is prioritized, perhaps over anything else, over a strategic, particular, carefully crafted path. It's that vision. Because, as the authors say, without an aim, the road to change is hard. There's that great old axiom, right? If you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. I love that. So if we're going to widen the circle of care, which will be something widening, broadening, that spirit is going to be our pledge drive theme. And I think it's going to be our theme, right? We're going to open up and come back wider. And there's no way to thread that needle, these authors suggest. The churches that are suggested, one in Annapolis, one in Tulsa, one in the Arizona area, they have had different levels of their own streaks of independence. They were very anti-segregationist. They have merged with a Pentecostal church and created humanist and like lively services that have just evolved their whole way. The Annapolis church had separate services, unified services, big fights. It's going to be hard to change a culture to meet the world. But what about life isn't hard? Every time you grow and learn something new, you have to become different and you have to struggle. We all know that, right? It's not a simple thing to redirect the culture, the mission, the style of a church. And this book asks that more than anything else, applying kind of an anti-racist lens, putting on sort of, I don't know, what I wouldn't call them rose-colored glasses, but different colored glasses to see the ways in which you're being exclusive is required. That's essentially crucial. Relationships, not tokenized ones, not one where people of a color come in and you fawn all over them. In one phrase, African Americans describe the encounter with white congregations, Unitarian Universalist congregations, as being one in which they were overly accepted and not accepted enough. It's relationships, and they have to get beyond politeness. Think about relationships on our dream board, or I do, that are not tokens, that are just sort of real, authentic relationships. Creating covenants are one of the ways to get there. Putting people on the board that sort of become observers of things. Holding oneself accountable along the way. If you think about like a GPS hunt, or a treasure hunt. Relationships, intentionality, leadership that is reflective of the place that you want to be are all there. The authors, one of the more challenging things is they ask, what has this congregation done to offer figurative or literal shelter, sanctuary to people who are outside the norm of your church? Where have you reached out to bring in what we might call the other? In our church, we invited in draft dodgers early in our years, and for it got tapped phone lines. We have recently invited in a political refugee into our fold, lived with one of our members, Kim Prado Store, in some ways was supported by myself and other members of the church, brought in by Rachel, a small act in a time of immigration challenges. But if we're honest, we're not necessarily that much of a sanctuary. Churches that are along this path flatten power structures and at the same time lift up leaders of people who are different. They create space in meetings to make sure every voice gets heard, not just the loudest like myself or the most comfortable talking. Questions that say, how are we keeping the circle open? Churches in this space are always more multi-generational. They're not, maybe there's a little bit of a noisy quality to it. We'll probably never get to a place where all of our kids and all of us are always integrated, but we might think about the ways in which every other culture or most other cultures other than our culture tends to do much more multi-generational things together. That's a little bit more of a dynamic quality to that. Worship-wise, we're going to have to mix it up some. We have the standard sort of talky Protestant service, and we're working to change that. It's more difficult than any when you've got to force to talk to a camera. But you could probably expect, if my dream board gets done, is we're a little bit more dynamic, a little bit louder, a little bit more vibrant. That kind of classic, it was a line in this book that said, the historic model, and it hurt, it really did, the historical model of preaching, being the transmission of knowledge, was reflective of an outdated colonial framework. That I like to preach. That one hurt. Here's a few phrases, and I'll close it just by I wanted to sort of set us on the path to some degree here. A few phrases: adaptability and entrepreneurship. Experiential learning came from chapter 2, just like it sounds. Identifying not always what's wrong and what doesn't work, but what can be improved and what brings life. A much greater willingness to make mistakes, understand that they're part of the process, a much greater willingness to sort of be flexible in terms of goals, a real desire to have cross-cultural relationships with the knowledge that that is itself healing, is itself a greater wholeness of humanity. People in these churches that have walked through at Annapolis to outside of Phoenix have had to embrace a willingness to be uncomfortable, and a combination of patience and persistence. An ethos, not a program, of anti-racism. I want you to hear that. A general ethos, a shared ethos, a sense of culture around anti-racism, not a program that a few people attend. A still under construction sense. Black Affairs Council leader Dr. Sanyaka's image of Unitarian Universalism as a faith under construction, which is very true to our visions. We know that revelation is not sealed, and we constantly evolve more than anyone. Invites humility and curiosity. I like that. I need people to show humility and curiosity towards me. Racism and all its effects cannot be dismantled without deliberate analysis and action. I think we've seen that. Even civil rights gains, even affirmative action, even the limitation and public scorn on language has not fundamentally changed the dynamics and the metrics of where African Americans stand. It's in our principles. The second and sixth Unitarian Universalist principles, which affirm and promote justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. That's the second. And the goal of world community demand that we do something like this. And there's an eighth principle that's flying around the denomination, which pins our actions and our intention to being anti-racist. Some people think it should be a preamble. Vivian likes it as a preamble. I think it makes more sense there too. People of color in our denomination, ministers in particular, have pinned their hopes to what we could be, not what we are. They've fallen in love and at times out of love with a group that didn't accept them. That's a very poignant and wise line. People have fallen in love with a faith that they left out of. People have fallen in love with the aspiration of what we could be, not what we are. That's a challenge. The good news is we're hardly alone. The entire denomination is doing this. We've got 15 loyal people gathered Sundays to do this. There are a ton of new resources to use. intercultural development inventories, building the world we dream of, workshops, Soul Matters, Black Lives You, lots of stuff. We've always asked ourselves to do hard things. That's what this denomination does. It doesn't always succeed, but it has never retreated in challenging itself to be different. It's always different. It's what we do. In the 90s, we challenged the sort of heteronormative ideas about sexuality, and we embraced LGBTQ, and it broadened out who we were. In the 1920s and 30s, we embraced humanism, invited atheist pastors into the pulpits, and transformed and, sustained and grew from that time. We can revel in our improvisational nature. You use turning to see other colors can once again find reason to dance in body and spirit. It's an exciting vision, actually. It's a hard thing for me to do. It will be a hard thing for us to do. But how cool would it be if we, up on this hill, became a much more diverse place where we didn't have to bemoan the fact that there weren't people of color sitting next to one another all the time? It'd be nice. It's a little embarrassing. I have a friend who lives in San Francisco, lives in North Beach area, and it was the first thing he noticed about our congregation. He said, "I want to watch your services online when we were, or I want to." I asked him, and he was sort of like, given who we say we are and who we are is a distance we have to try to travel. Amen. And now, as we hit you up for money, I'm going to offer something a lot lighter. There was a well-known man. This is an untrue story, one of my many. And he was not a churchgoer. He was a well-known person in town. And he went to Mass one Sunday, and the priest nearly fell over when he saw him. I don't think the priest had ever seen him in church before. After Mass, the priest caught up with him and said, "Joe, I'm so glad you decided to come to Mass today. What made you come?" Joe said, "Well, I got to be honest with you, Father. A while back, I misplaced this hat I really loved. And I know that Bob Flynn had a hat just like mine, and I know he comes to church every Sunday, and I know that when you walk in the back of the church, people take off their hats and they put them down. So just since you've asked, I have to tell you, I was going to sit for a while, and then I was going to sneak out the back and steal Bob's hat." The priest said with a hopeful glint in his eye, "Well, Joe, I noticed that you didn't steal Bob Flynn's hat. And I'm thinking that maybe it was my sermon on the 10 Commandments that changed your mind. Was it?" Joe replied, "Well, after I heard your sermon on the 10 Commandments, I have to decide that I didn't really need to steal the hat at all." And the priest was thrilled. Almost with a tear in his eye, he gave Joe a smile and almost gave him a big hug and said, "So after I talked about how stealing was one of the sins, you decided you could do without the hat." Joe slowly shook his head. He said, "No, Father. Actually, when you were running through the list of sins and you got to thou shalt not commit adultery, I remembered where I left my hat." Give generously to the life and work of the church that challenges you, sings with you, and makes you laugh. Thank you, Michael and Severin. Michael's one of our favorite musicians. Thanks. We're going to share our closing words. Leanne's going to come up and start it off for us.
Let us remember that this church is dedicated to the proposition that behind all of our differences, beneath all of our diversity, there is a unity that makes us one and binds us forever together, in spite of time and death and the space between the stars. We pause in silent witness to that unity.
May the blessing of love be upon you. May love's peace abide with you. May love's presence illuminate your hearts. What a great line. May love's presence illuminate your hearts now and forevermore. So be it. Amen. Shalom. Salam. Namaste. Blessed be. And as we've stolen from the Quakers, and now our service truly begins, or at least should. Go in peace. Go out into the world with the effort to build that community that we all want to live in. Amen.